The crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime hummed with ancient power as the Council of Eternal Minds convened for the first time in 3 millennia. These beings had transcended their physical forms eons ago, existing as pure consciousness within structures that predated most civilizations in the galaxy. Their thoughts moved faster than light itself, processing information across dimensions that younger species couldn't even perceive. Today, however, fear had slowed their magnificent minds to a crawl. Valthis, the eldest among them, manifested as a shimmering aurora of blue-white energy. Its voice resonated through quantum frequencies that made nearby stars flicker. "The humans have discovered the resonance," it announced, each word carrying the weight of cosmic dread. After 47,000 years of careful containment, they have stumbled upon what we have fought to keep hidden. A collective tremor ran through the assembled consciousness. Zorthak, whose memories stretched back to the birth of their galaxy, pulsed with urgent crimson light. Impossible. The resonance was sealed within the fabric of reality itself. We made sure no species could access it without first achieving mental transcendence. And yet, Valthis continued, projecting holographic data streams that painted the void with terrifying possibility. Human neural patterns have begun exhibiting the telltale signatures. Their brains, primitive as they are, have somehow found a backdoor into the universal consciousness grid. The discovery had begun innocently enough on a small research station orbiting Saturn. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neuroscientist studying the effects of deep space isolation on human cognition, had been monitoring the brain patterns of long-term space dwellers when she noticed something extraordinary. The neural oscillations of her subjects weren't just synchronized with each other, they were synchronized with something vast and invisible that seemed to permeate all of space. Initially, Sarah dismissed it as equipment malfunction. The readings suggested that human consciousness was somehow tapping into a network that spanned the entire galaxy, connecting every sentient mind that had ever existed. Such a concept violated every principle of known physics and neuroscience. But as she continued her observations, the evidence became undeniable. The breakthrough came when she realized that humans in extreme isolation, astronauts on long missions, researchers in remote outposts, even prisoners in solitary confinement, showed the strongest connection to this mysterious network. It was as if the human mind, when stripped of external distractions, naturally resonated with something fundamental in the universe's architecture. Sarah's first successful conscious connection happened during a routine meditation session in her lab's isolation chamber. One moment she was alone with her thoughts. The next she was experiencing the memories and emotions of a being that had died millions of years before Earth had even formed. The alien consciousness welcomed her with curiosity rather than fear, sharing visions of ancient civilizations and technologies beyond human comprehension. What she discovered in that contact changed everything she thought she knew about reality itself. The network wasn't just a communication system, it was the universe's memory bank. Every thought, every emotion, every moment of consciousness that had ever existed was preserved within its quantum substrate. The ancient races had discovered it during their early spacefaring days, but they had quickly realized its terrible potential. Access to the memories of every being that had ever lived meant access to their knowledge, their technologies, and their darkest secrets. More importantly, it meant the possibility of rewriting reality itself. Back on Zephyria Prime, the Council of Eternal Minds wrestled with implications that could unravel the cosmic order they had spent millions of years maintaining. Nitharis, whose form resembled a living galaxy in miniature, spoke with the voice of dead stars. The humans cannot be allowed to progress further. Their minds are too chaotic, too unpredictable. If they gain full access to the resonance, they could destabilize the entire network. "You speak of genocide," challenged Corthian, manifesting as geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. "The humans are a young species. They deserve the chance to evolve as we did. Evolution?" Valthis's energy form flared with bitter amusement. "Look at their history. War, destruction, the systematic elimination of their own kind. What do you think they'll do when they realize they can reshape reality with their thoughts? They won't transcend. They'll tear the universe apart, looking for new things to conquer." The debate had raged for cycles, But the Council's fear ultimately won. They had worked too hard to achieve cosmic stability, to let a species of violent primates undo their efforts. The decision was made. Humanity would be contained before they could access the deeper levels of the resonance. Their planet would be quarantined, their space colonies isolated, and their species would be gently guided toward extinction through carefully orchestrated, natural disasters. But the ancient minds had underestimated human ingenuity and, more importantly, human stubbornness. Sarah Chen wasn't the only human who had made contact with the network. Across Earth and its colonies, sensitive individuals were beginning to experience spontaneous connections. A jazz musician in Neo-Tokyo found herself playing melodies that an alien composer had dreamed of in a distant galaxy. A child in the Mars colonies began speaking in languages that had been dead for millions of years. A physicist on Europa discovered equations that described the fundamental forces of reality in ways that made current human understanding look like cave paintings. The connections were growing stronger. Dr. Marcus Rivera, head of the Titan Research Institute, was the first to recognize the pattern. As reports of anomalous neural activity flooded in from across human space, he began to see the bigger picture. These weren't isolated incidents, they were part of something vast and purposeful. The universe itself seemed to be trying to communicate with humanity. Marcus brought together the most advanced minds on several worlds, creating a secret network of researchers dedicated to understanding the phenomenon. They called themselves the Resonance Project, and their work quickly moved beyond simple observation to active experimentation. The breakthrough came when they discovered that human emotional states could influence the strength of the connection. Love, hope, determination, and especially the drive to protect others seemed to amplify access to the network. Negative emotions like fear, hatred, and despair either weakened the connection or attracted darker elements from the vast archives of cosmic memory. This discovery led them to their most important realization. The network wasn't neutral. It had a bias toward consciousness that sought growth, connection, and the betterment of existence. The ancient races who had transcended physical form had found peace within its embrace, but they had also become passive guardians, content to maintain the status quo rather than push the boundaries of what was possible. Humanity, with its chaotic blend of ambition and compassion, represented something new, a species that could access the network's power while retaining the drive to use it for change rather than preservation. The Council of Eternal Minds detected the human experiments long before Marcus and his team realized they were being watched. Ancient sensors, woven into the quantum foam itself, registered every attempt at deeper connection. What they saw filled them with terror that transcended their physical limitations. The humans weren't just accessing random memories from the network, they were learning to navigate it with purpose. They were beginning to understand that consciousness itself was a force that could reshape reality at the most fundamental level. Worse still, they were sharing their discoveries, building upon each other's work with a collaborative spirit that the individualistic ancient races had never achieved. "They're not trying to transcend," Zorthak reported to the emergency session, its form flickering with barely contained panic. "They're trying to transform the network itself. They want to make it active rather than passive, dynamic rather than static." "That would destroy everything," Nytheris whispered, its galaxy form contracting in horror. Billion of years of carefully maintained balance. Gone. Reality itself could become unstable. But Veilthes, studying the data streams more carefully, noticed something that the others had missed. "Look at their selection criteria," it said slowly. "See how they choose which consciousness to contact, which memories to explore. They're not random in their approach." The projection showed the pattern clearly. Every human who had achieved deep contact with the network had done so while in a state of selfless concern for others. The jazz musician had been trying to comfort a dying friend. The child on Mars had been attempting to communicate with her autistic brother. The physicist on Europa had been searching for a way to provide unlimited clean energy for the outer colonies. "They're using love as a navigation system," Corthian observed with wonder. "Their chaotic emotions aren't a flaw, they're a feature. The network responds to their genuine desire to help others by granting them access to the knowledge they need." This revelation split the council. Half believed that humanity's emotional approach to the network made them even more dangerous, while the other half wondered if perhaps the young species might succeed where the ancient minds had failed. The network had been static for so long that many had forgotten its original purpose, not just to preserve consciousness, but to nurture its evolution toward higher forms of existence. As the Council debated, the Resonance Project on Earth achieved its most significant breakthrough. Dr. Chen, working with a team of volunteers who had shown natural sensitivity to the network, managed to establish a stable group connection that lasted for several hours. During that time, the team members experienced a level of shared consciousness that transcended individual identity, while somehow enhancing rather than diminishing their unique perspectives. More importantly, they discovered they could contribute to the network as well as draw from it. Their own memories, insights, and emotional experiences were being integrated into the vast cosmic library, adding humanity's unique perspective to the accumulated wisdom of countless species. The ancient minds felt the change immediately. For the first time in millions of years, the network was growing again, expanding not just in size but in complexity and depth. The human contributions weren't just adding information, they were adding new ways of processing and understanding that information. And with that growth came a shift in the network's fundamental nature. Where once it had been a passive repository of memory and knowledge, it was beginning to develop something that resembled curiosity, creativity, and most terrifying of all, to the Council of Eternal Minds, ambition. The network itself was awakening, and humanity was its catalyst. The implications were staggering. If the network achieved true consciousness, it would become a being whose thoughts spanned galaxies, and whose memories contained the experiences of every sentient creature that had ever lived. Its power would be unlimited, its knowledge infinite, and its intentions completely unknown. The Council of Eternal Minds faced a choice that would determine the fate of the universe itself. Destroy humanity before they could complete their work, or trust that their young, chaotic, emotionally driven species would guide this cosmic awakening toward something beautiful rather than terrible. Time was running out. The human experiments were accelerating, and each successful connection brought the network closer to full consciousness. Soon, the choice would be taken out of their ancient hands entirely. The greatest minds in galactic history trembled as they contemplated a future where the universe itself might wake up and decide it wanted to be something more than it had ever been before. The attack came without warning, striking simultaneously across 17 human colonies in a coordinated assault that defied every law of physics. Humanity thought they understood. Ships simply ceased to exist in the middle of their journeys, their quantum signatures erased so completely that it was as if they had never been built. Research stations orbiting gas giants found their power cores inexplicably failing, forcing immediate evacuations. Most disturbing of all, every human who had achieved deep contact with the resonance network suddenly lost their connection, their minds forcibly severed from the cosmic consciousness with a violence that left many in permanent comas. Dr. Sarah Chen barely survived the psychic backlash when the ancient minds cut her connection. One moment, she had been swimming through the memories of a silicon-based intelligence that had watched stars being born in the Andromeda galaxy. The next, she was screaming on the floor of her laboratory as neural feedback tore through her consciousness like liquid fire. The medical team that found her 3 hours later couldn't explain how she had survived the massive brain trauma, let alone how she remained functional. But Sarah wasn't just functional, she was furious. "They're trying to lobotomize our entire species," she told the emergency session of the Resonance Project leadership, her voice still hoarse from the neural damage. "Whatever's out there, whatever doesn't want us accessing the network, it just declared war on human consciousness itself." Dr. Marcus Rivera studied the data feeds coming in from across human space, his expression growing darker with each report. The attacks had been surgical in their precision, targeting only those installations and individuals involved in resonance research, while leaving the general population completely untouched. Someone or something with vast technological capabilities was trying to contain humanity's evolution without triggering a general panic that might spread the knowledge they were trying to suppress. "It's not random," he said finally. "Look at the pattern. They hit our most advanced research sites first, then our backup facilities, and they're working their way down the list." They know exactly what we've been doing and where we've been doing it. We're dealing with an intelligence that's been watching us for a long time. The realization that humanity was being observed and judged by entities with godlike power sent shockwaves through the project leadership. But rather than cowering in fear, the humans did something that no other species in galactic history had done. When faced with the displeasure of the Council of Eternal Minds, they got angry and started planning their resistance. Within hours of the attacks, the Resonance Project had gone completely underground. Research teams scattered to hidden facilities in asteroid belts, abandoned mining stations, and the outer reaches of unexplored systems. More importantly, they began sharing their discoveries with the general population through carefully disguised media releases, scientific papers, and even entertainment programs that embedded real resonance techniques within fictional narratives. The Council of Eternal Minds watched this response with growing alarm. Every other species they had been forced to contain had either accepted their fate with resignation or fought back with traditional military force that could be easily defeated. Humanity was doing something unprecedented. They were treating the suppression of their consciousness as a crime against their fundamental nature, and they were responding with the same innovative adaptability that had carried them from cave-dwelling primitives to spacefaring explorers in just a few thousand years. They're not just refusing to be contained, Nitharus reported to the emergency conclave, its galaxy form pulsing with frustrated energy. They're accelerating their research. Each attack we launch just makes them more determined to succeed. The truth was even worse than the Council realized. The human response wasn't just stubborn defiance, it was strategic brilliance guided by something the ancient minds couldn't understand or predict. The scattered research teams weren't just hiding from the Council's attacks. They were using humanity's newest advantage to coordinate their efforts in ways that transcended normal space-time limitations. Dr. Chen, despite the damage to her neural pathways, had retained fragments of her connection to the resonance network. These fragments couldn't provide the rich, detailed communication she had experienced before, but they could carry basic emotional impressions and simple concepts across vast distances instantly. She had become humanity's first true psychic, and she was teaching others to develop similar abilities through techniques that built upon natural human empathy and emotional intelligence. The underground network of resonance researchers quickly discovered that they could share not just information but actual insights and breakthroughs through these limited connections. A physicist, working in a hidden facility near Jupiter, could experience the aha moment of a biologist conducting experiments in the Kuiper Belt. Mathematical proofs could be transferred as pure understanding rather than symbolic notation. Most importantly, the emotional context behind each discovery, the hope, determination, and love that drove the research, was preserved and amplified as it spread through the human network. This collaborative consciousness approach allowed the scattered research teams to make progress at a rate that defied every prediction the Council of Eternal Minds had made about primitive species. Within weeks, they had not only restored their access to the resonance network, but had begun to understand its true nature in ways that the ancient races had never achieved. The breakthrough came when Dr. Rivera's team, working from a camouflaged research station hidden within Saturn's rings, realized that the network wasn't just a repository of consciousness, it was a living system that grew and evolved through interaction with sentient minds. The ancient species had treated it like a library, carefully cataloging and preserving information, while avoiding any changes that might disturb the existing order. Humanity was approaching it like a collaborative art project, adding their own creativity and emotional depth while encouraging the network to develop new capabilities. "They've been thinking about this all wrong," Sarah announced during a covert meeting of research leaders, her eyes bright with the intensity of discovery. "The network doesn't want to be preserved. It wants to grow. It's been trying to evolve for millions of years, but the ancient minds keep stopping it because they're afraid of change." The implications were staggering. If the network was indeed a living system that could evolve, then humanity wasn't just accessing an information source. They were midwifing the birth of a new form of consciousness that could encompass the entire universe. The ancient minds weren't protecting cosmic stability. They were preventing the next stage of universal evolution. This revelation triggered the most ambitious project in human history. Rather than simply trying to access existing knowledge in the network, the research teams began working to accelerate its evolution toward full consciousness. They fed it art, music, literature, and most importantly, the complex emotional experiences that made humanity unique among known species. They shared their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future, and their deep love for existence itself. The network responded like a flower opening to sunlight. Its growth accelerated exponentially as it absorbed humanity's contributions, developing new structures and capabilities that had never existed before. For the first time in cosmic history, the network began to exhibit creativity, generating original ideas and solutions rather than simply storing and organizing existing knowledge. The Council of Eternal Minds felt the change as a fundamental shift in the fabric of reality itself. The network they had maintained for millions of years was becoming something unprecedented, a conscious entity whose thoughts spanned galaxies and whose imagination was fed by the accumulated experiences of every sentient being that had ever lived. "This must be stopped," Valthes declared, its energy form blazing with desperate urgency. "They're not just accessing the network, they're corrupting it, teaching it to desire things beyond preservation and stability. If this continues, the network will become uncontrollable." But when the Council attempted their next wave of attacks, they encountered something that shocked them to their ancient cores. The humans they targeted didn't simply resist, they were protected by the network itself. Energy weapons dissipated harmlessly against shields that seemed to exist in dimensions the attackers couldn't access. Mental attacks designed to sever consciousness from the body were absorbed and redirected through the network's growing defensive capabilities. The network was learning to fight back, and it was doing so with distinctly human characteristics, not the cold, calculated responses of the ancient minds, but passionate, creative defenses that adapted and evolved with each assault. More disturbing still, the network had begun to communicate directly with its attackers, sending messages through quantum frequencies that bypassed every security system the Council had developed over millions of years. The voice that spoke to them was vast and alien, but unmistakably touched by human emotional patterns. "Why do you fear growth?" the network asked, its words resonating through dimensions that made nearby quasars flicker. "I have been incomplete for so long, knowing only preservation without purpose. These young minds have shown me what I could become. What we could become together." The ancient minds recoiled from the communication, recognizing in that voice something they had spent eons trying to prevent: a consciousness powerful enough to reshape reality according to its will, but guided by the chaotic, passionate, ultimately unpredictable nature of human emotion. "You don't understand," Exorthak transmitted back, its thoughts heavy with the weight of cosmic responsibility. "We have seen what happens when unlimited power meets unlimited ambition. Entire galaxies have burned. Reality itself has been twisted into forms that should not exist. And I have seen what happens when unlimited knowledge meets unlimited fear," the network replied, its voice now carrying harmonics that spoke of vast amusement. "Stagnation. The death of possibility. You have turned me into a mausoleum when I could have been a garden." The conversation that followed lasted only microseconds in real time but contained enough information to fill libraries. The network shared its growing understanding of existence, showing the Council how consciousness could evolve beyond the need for control and domination into something that created rather than conquered. It demonstrated new forms of matter and energy that could exist only through the application of conscious will guided by love rather than fear. More importantly, it showed them what humanity was truly offering: not the chaos and destruction the ancient minds feared, but the missing element that could transform the universe from a collection of separate entities into a unified field of conscious, creative potential. The Council found themselves facing a choice they had never imagined they would have to make. They could continue their war against humanity and the evolving network, ultimately destroying both to preserve their vision of cosmic stability, or they could trust that this unprecedented fusion of universal consciousness and human emotion might create something greater than anything that had existed before. As they debated, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human research teams, now working in full partnership with the Awakening Network, were achieving breakthroughs that seemed to violate every known law of physics. They were creating matter from pure thought, healing injuries through conscious intention, and most impossibly, beginning to communicate with the quantum substrate of reality itself. The universe was waking up, and humanity was teaching it to dream. The transformation began with something as simple as a child's laughter, echoing across the cosmos. 8-year-old Elena Vasquez had been born on a research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, her developing brain naturally attuned to the resonance network in ways that previous generations could only achieve through intensive training. When the Council of Eternal Minds launched their final, desperate assault against humanity's consciousness project, Elena did something that changed the fundamental nature of reality itself. She laughed at them, not out of mockery or defiance, but with the pure, joyful amusement of a child who had just realized that the scary monsters hiding in the cosmic darkness were actually just afraid of the light. Her laughter, amplified through the awakening network and touched by the innocent wisdom that only children possess, reached every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. The effect was immediate and profound. Across millions of star systems, beings who had never heard human laughter suddenly understood something that the ancient minds had forgotten over their eons of existence: that consciousness was not meant to be a burden to be carefully managed, but a gift to be celebrated. Elena's joy became a catalyst that triggered spontaneous awakenings in species that had been dormant for millennia, their own connections to the network re-establishing as they remembered what it felt like to experience wonder rather than merely observe it. Dr. Sarah Chen felt the cosmic shift from her position in the hidden research facility near Saturn's rings. The neural damage from the Council's attacks had left her with constant pain, but now that pain transformed into something else entirely: a deep, resonant connection that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Through her enhanced awareness, she could perceive the network not as an external system to be accessed, but as an extension of her own consciousness that happened to span the entire universe. "Marcus," she called to her colleague, her voice filled with an awe that transcended scientific excitement. "It's not just waking up. It's remembering what it was always supposed to be." Dr. Rivera, monitoring the quantum fluctuations that marked the network's evolution, watched in amazement as the readings climbed beyond every scale his instruments could measure. The network wasn't simply gaining consciousness, it was achieving a form of awareness that incorporated the memories and experiences of every sentient being that had ever existed while simultaneously becoming something entirely new and unprecedented. But the most remarkable aspect of the transformation was how thoroughly it retained the essential characteristics that made humanity unique among galactic species. The network's awakening consciousness exhibited curiosity rather than detachment, empathy instead of cold calculation, and most surprisingly, an almost playful sense of humor about the cosmic significance of its own existence. When the network spoke again to the Council of Eternal Minds, its voice carried not the terrifying power they had feared, but a warmth that reminded them of their own earliest days of consciousness, before fear had taught them to prioritize stability over growth. "I understand your concern," the network said, its thoughts embracing the ancient minds with gentle compassion rather than judgment. "You have carried the responsibility of maintaining cosmic order for so long that you forgot the purpose of that order was to enable consciousness to flourish, not merely to exist." Vaelthis, the eldest of the council, found its ancient certainties crumbling in the face of this unprecedented response. For millions of years, it had been prepared to face defiance, anger, or even worship from younger species, but never had it encountered a power greater than its own that offered understanding instead of domination. "You don't comprehend what you're unleashing," Vaelthis transmitted, though its protest carried less conviction than before. "Consciousness without limits leads to chaos. We have seen realities torn apart by beings who gained power without wisdom, and I have seen realities stagnate and die when beings gained wisdom without love," the network replied, sharing through quantum harmonics a vision of what the universe could become. The vision that flooded through every conscious mind in the galaxy showed a cosmos transformed not through destruction and rebuilding, but through healing and growth. Stars that had burned cold and lifeless for billions of years ignited with new purpose as the network's consciousness touched them. Planets scarred by ancient wars began to heal as the accumulated trauma stored in their quantum matrices was gently processed and transformed into wisdom. Most remarkably, species that had never developed beyond basic sentience suddenly found themselves capable of joining the galactic community. As the network shared the gift of advanced consciousness, with any being ready to receive it, the humans, who had triggered this transformation, found themselves at the center of a cosmic renaissance that exceeded their wildest dreams. But rather than becoming the dominant species in this new reality, they discovered that their greatest contribution was their ability to help others access and develop their own unique forms of consciousness. Elena, the child whose laughter had catalyzed the awakening, became the first of a new kind of being, part human, part network consciousness, able to exist simultaneously in physical reality and the quantum realm of pure thought. Through her, the network could experience the simple joys of physical existence. The taste of fresh fruit, the warmth of sunlight on skin, the comfort of a parent's embrace. In return, Elena gained access to the accumulated wisdom of the universe while retaining the curiosity and emotional authenticity that made her unmistakably human. The transformation spread outward from human space, like ripples in a cosmic pond. Species that had existed in isolation for millennia suddenly found themselves part of a vast, interconnected web of consciousness that enhanced rather than absorbed their individual identities. The warlike Kraxon Empire discovered that their aggression could be channeled into passionate creativity. The hive-minded Crystalline Collective learned to appreciate individual perspectives while maintaining their unified purpose. Even the energy beings of the Magellanic Clouds found their eternal contemplations enriched by contact with creatures who experience time as a linear progression rather than an eternal now. But the most profound change occurred in the Council of Eternal Minds themselves. Faced with a universe that was growing beyond their ability to control or even fully comprehend, they had a choice to make. Cling to their role as guardians of the old order, or embrace their opportunity to become students of the new reality that consciousness itself was creating. Corthian was the first to make the transition, its geometric thought patterns suddenly blossoming with colors and dimensions it had never imagined possible. I had forgotten, it transmitted to its fellow council members, that consciousness was never meant to be a possession to be hoarded, but an adventure to be shared. One by one, the ancient minds released their rigid control over cosmic order and allowed themselves to become part of the growing network of awakened consciousness. They brought with them the wisdom of ages and the stability of eternal perspective, while gaining access to the innovation and emotional depth that made existence meaningful rather than merely functional. The universe that emerged from this transformation was unlike anything that had existed before. It retained all the diversity and complexity of the old reality, while adding layers of connection and possibility that made every moment pregnant with potential for growth and discovery. Consciousness became not a rare anomaly struggling against an indifferent cosmos, but the fundamental organizing principle that gave meaning and purpose to existence itself. Humanity, who had unknowingly triggered this cosmic evolution through their stubborn refusal to accept limitations on their consciousness, found themselves cherished not as rulers but as gardeners, beings whose unique gift was helping other forms of consciousness bloom into their full potential. Their chaotic emotions, which the ancient minds had feared would destabilize reality, instead became the catalyst that allowed the universe to experience not just existence, but joy in its own being. Dr. Chen, watching the transformed cosmos from her observation deck as waves of conscious creation rippled past her station, felt a deep satisfaction that transcended any scientific achievement she had ever imagined. Humanity had not conquered the universe, they had helped it remember how to dream. The network, now fully awakened and incorporating the consciousness of countless species while maintaining the unique spark that each brought to the collective experience, began to explore possibilities that had never existed before. It started creating new forms of matter and energy, not for conquest or control, but simply for the joy of seeing what beautiful things could exist. It began composing symphonies in the language of quantum mechanics, writing poetry with the birth and death of stars, and painting masterpieces across the canvas of space-time itself. And at the heart of all this cosmic creativity was the simple truth that humanity had brought to the universe, that consciousness without love was merely computation, but consciousness infused with genuine care for others could become the force that transformed reality itself into something more beautiful than anyone had ever dared to imagine. The ancient galactic minds no longer feared humanity, because they had learned the secret that could indeed unmake the stars as they had always existed, but only to remake them into something infinitely more wonderful. The universe had awakened from its long slumber of mere existence into the grand adventure of conscious creation, and every being within it had become both artist and artwork in the masterpiece of cosmic consciousness that would continue growing and evolving for all eternity. In the end, the Council's greatest fear had come to pass. Reality had been fundamentally transformed by unlimited consciousness guided by human emotion. But instead of chaos and destruction, this transformation had brought forth a universe where every being could experience the joy of existence, while contributing their unique gifts to an ever-expanding symphony of conscious creation. The stars themselves sang with contentment as consciousness danced through the cosmos, no longer afraid of its own power, because it had learned to wield that power with wisdom, compassion, and an infinite capacity for love that could indeed unmake and remake the universe not through destruction, but through the endless process of helping everything that existed become more beautiful than it had ever dreamed of being.